Originally established as an elite force within the Nazi Party, the Waffen-SS took on a variety of roles ranging from conventional warfare to suppressing civilian populations in occupied territories. Thousands of men volunteered to join this organization, and they participated in numerous battles throughout the conflict, from its early stages to its end. For many years, many of these men avoided discussing their involvement, often due to fear, shame, or personal reasons. However, later in life, some chose to speak out. Their testimonies offer insights into the inner workings of one of the 20th century's most dangerous organizations, though they do not alter the historical record. So, who were the last of the SS members to break their silence? One such individual was Rosu's Misch, who transitioned from being a woodworker to serving as a Führerguard. Misch's early life began in Silesia, marked by a strict Catholic upbringing that influenced his family's behavior. Orphaned at a young age, he was raised by his grandfather, a World War I veteran known for his stern and reserved demeanor. This disciplined upbringing would later prove instrumental in his joining the military order. As a young man, he apprenticed as an advertising painter, but he abandoned this career when he realized he possessed physical strength and desired a more dynamic life. At the age of 20, he enlisted. Following his training, Misch was assigned to the Signals Battalion of the Führer's Personal Protection Unit. In 1940, Rosu's Misch officially became part of Hitler's inner circle. He was not a combat soldier or a political advisor, but rather an information operator at headquarters. His duties involved monitoring telephone lines, managing internal message networks, and ensuring that communications remained operational. The young Misch was among a select few chosen to accompany Hitler wherever he went. From the Alps to East Prussia, he was part of the small team that traveled with the German leader. This proximity, however, did not translate into a close relationship or frequent conversations, as Hitler maintained a formal distance from those around him. Orders were clear, the hierarchy was unquestioned, and everyone had a defined role. Misch witnessed the unfolding of the conflict from behind the scenes. At the Berghof headquarters, he observed meetings with high-ranking commanders and saw figures like Himmler, Göring, and Goebbels coming and going with tense expressions. While not directly involved in the decision-making process, the information operator was still part of the internal structure. He offered no opinions, did not interfere, and only listened, forbidden from commenting on or revealing any information, a rule he obeyed with absolute loyalty. Over time, he gained the trust of the security team, particularly the head of the protection squad. This position allowed him to be near the Führer during crucial moments of the war. When Hitler left the Berghof and moved to an underground bunker in Berlin, Misch was included in the small group that accompanied him. The complex beneath the Reich Chancellery became the final stage for the regime. From April 1945, the atmosphere in the bunker grew increasingly tense and relentless. Misch worked at the information center, just meters from the main office. He was responsible for maintaining contact with the front lines and other officials of the Third Reich. The calls became more desperate, and the reports grew more dire. Berlin was under siege, and morale was plummeting. Nevertheless, internal order was strictly maintained. In those final days, Misch witnessed a silent routine. Hitler would have breakfast, review maps, issue orders, and meet with members of his inner circle before retiring to his private room with Eva Braun. Classical music played over the loudspeakers, creating an unsettling sense of calm. There was no crying, no shouting, only acceptance. The operator remained at his post, moving only when summoned by a superior officer. One day, Goebbels asked him to secure a line to contact his children. On another occasion, Martin Bormann instructed him to maintain contact with the remaining resistance units. The telephone center became the regime's last link to the outside world. Misch didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what was happening. He followed instructions, absorbed sounds, observed the world, and learned to control his anger. The day Hitler's suicide was announced brought an eerie silence, devoid of speeches or explanations. Orders were confined to rationing supplies and checking logistical preparations. Misch was among the last to see the German leader alive. He didn't enter the room, but he heard the gunshot from next door. Moments later, he saw the body being carried out to the courtyard for cremation. He remained at his post while others prepared to flee. Bormann, Goebbels, and other high-ranking officers discussed conflicting plans. Some tried to leave in groups, while others awaited the Allied forces. Misch was instructed to maintain communications to the very end. He was not permitted to leave the operations center. He was solely responsible for internal information. He knew the Soviet army was only meters away. He could hear the explosions. His final order was to destroy the equipment before it fell into enemy hands. He did so clumsily, cutting wires, disconnecting devices, and severing the last threads of a fading power. When Soviet troops stormed the bunker, Rosusmish surrendered. His work was over. After surrendering in the bunker, Rosusmish was separated from other prisoners and taken by Soviet soldiers to an area controlled by the NKVD. Interrogators quickly recognized him as part of Hitler's inner circle. Although his role was technical and subordinate, his presence in the final refuge made him a valuable witness. He was placed in solitary confinement and forced to sign documents without fully understanding their contents. In his initial statements, he explained that he was a telephone operator and had never been involved in political or military decisions. In the early days of his imprisonment, he was transferred between various military headquarters. Each time a senior officer arrived, he was brought in to testify. The questions focused on Hitler's final moments, Bormann's movements, and the whereabouts of other leaders. Mish consistently maintained that he was not involved in secret meetings. His work was purely technical. Nevertheless, his proximity to the leader made him an important figure in reconstructing events. He was later transferred to Moscow on a train with other prisoners deemed valuable. The journey lasted several days in sealed carriages under constant surveillance. Upon arrival, he was taken to Lubyanka prison, where the interrogations intensified. There they showed him photographs, maps, and documents. They asked him to identify faces, provide names, and describe voices. Although his role was insignificant, Soviet officers sought detailed information to confirm Hitler's death. He was repeatedly confronted with conflicting information circulating in the international media. Some claimed Hitler had escaped, others denied his death. Mish consistently repeated what he had witnessed. He heard the gunshot. He didn't see the body directly, but he recognized those who carried it away. This testimony was enough for the interrogators to consider it true. From then on, attention shifted to examining the internal chain of command, security procedures, and bunker routines. After weeks of interrogation, he was transferred to a labor camp outside Moscow. Here, he was assigned construction and maintenance work. The weather was harsh, food was scarce, and supervision was constant. He shared space with other German soldiers, although most were unaware of his past. He avoided talking about the bunker, wanting to avoid attention. He knew any inappropriate comment could cost him his life. Over time, he was sent to a labor camp in the north, where he worked logging trees. Conditions were even harsher. Winter temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Prisoners were given only a thin jacket and unlined clothing. They had to log trees for 12 hours each day. Many did not survive. Mish persevered, thanks to his youth and a quiet determination to endure. He never complained. He just followed orders. Throughout this time, he kept his memories locked in his head. He knew that no one would believe him later. He thought his testimony. However, he resolved to memorize every detail, face, hallway, voice, and decision. While his fellow prisoners spoke of their families or pre-war lives, he silently recalled the bunker's layout, the arrangement of rooms, and how the telephone lines were connected. This was how he maintained his sanity. As the war ended, many prisoners were released and returned to Germany. But not him. Because of his association with Fegeline's personal guard, his immediate return was denied. He was transferred to a smaller prison where he was isolated. There, he began writing down his memories on scraps of paper, hiding them under a brick, fearing their discovery and destruction. In one of these fragments, he wrote a list of the people he saw entering the office during those final days. After 8 years of captivity, Soviet authorities unexpectedly released him, taking him to a train station and leaving him without papers, money, or contacts. He walked for hours until he found a border checkpoint where he explained his situation. The officers recognized him and allowed him to enter East Germany. From there, he made his way to West Berlin, where part of his family still lived. Upon his return, he found a ruined city. His old neighborhood had vanished under rubble. The streets were unrecognizable. People lived in destroyed buildings or shared rooms, and no one expected him. His name was not on any list of survivors. Some assumed he had died in combat. Others believed he had escaped with Hitler. It took him weeks to gather the necessary documents to prove his identity. He was eventually registered as a war veteran and given a place in shared accommodation. In those early years, he avoided talking about his experiences, fearing being seen as an accomplice. He simply sought work, finding employment trading in building materials. He lived modestly, avoiding contact with former soldiers and shunning questions about the past. His wife supported him, but also urged him to remain silent. They had a young daughter and wanted to protect her from possible repercussions. Gradually, journalists began searching for names connected to Hitler's inner circle. One of them found Misch and requested an interview. Initially refusing, he eventually agreed to recount his story on the condition that it not be recorded. The journalist took notes in a notebook and later published a short article in a specialized magazine. It did not cause a major stir, but revived interest in the final days of the Third Reich. Over time, more reporters approached him. Some sought to confirm conspiracy theories, while others wanted a human perspective. Misch agreed to interviews, but only under his conditions. He never considered himself responsible, always reiterating that he only did technical work. He did not defend or justify himself, saying he was there but made no decisions. His tone was calm, avoiding adjectives or sensationalizing the situation, answering with long sentences as if reading a report. One of the moments he recounted most often was the last conversation he witnessed between Goebbels and Bormann. The two argued about whether to escape or die in the bunker. Goebbels said he could not abandon his wife and children. Bormann was determined to find a way out. Eventually, Goebbels ordered him to stay. Misch stood silently at the door, saying nothing. No one asked for his opinion. No one spoke to him. He simply recorded what he witnessed. Over time, Rokas Misch became a unique figure. He was not publicly famous, but his name appeared among the few surviving witnesses who had been with Hitler in his final moments. As others passed away, his account gained importance, not because it offered analysis or justification, but because he recounted his work accurately. He did not see himself as a thinker or analyst, writing no defenses or speeches, simply recounting what he did. Unlike other members of the regime who chose silence or justified their actions, he spoke naturally, without changing his tone and without pride or regret. He always reiterated that his work was technical. That Misch was not part of the decision-making group, nor did he engage in combat or carry out combat orders. He always stated that he operated the telephone, handled calls, and observed the events around him. In the 1990s, he gave longer interviews to German media outlets. He responded calmly, sometimes recounting stories from the bunker, such as the timing of meals, power outages, and the tremors caused by bomb explosions. He explained that although he was near Hitler, he did not speak with him, only saw him pass by, heard excerpts from his speeches, and was called upon to check connections or relay a message. When asked about the dictator's death, his account remained consistent. He heard a gunshot, saw the door close, and observed them carrying the body away. He added no details about the image or embellished the scene. He reiterated that he did not enter the office, touch anything, or interfere. His story never changed. During that time, he received offers to participate in documentaries. He declined some, believing certain media outlets distorted the truth or sought sensationalism. He only accepted offers that promised to recount events without alteration. Consequently, his voice was recorded in historical documents and documentaries based on direct testimony. In all instances, he repeated that he was not a criminal or politician, but merely performing a technical job. In retirement, he lived in a modest apartment, devoid of obvious signs of his past. He kept no symbols or images and did not discuss the war unless directly asked. In those instances, he responded with the same composure he had shown during interrogations and ordeals. He did not seek attention, nor did he try to evade it. He accepted his role without seeking recognition. One significant moment in his later years was participating in a symposium on the fall of Berlin. He was invited as a witness and was present at a panel discussion, though he only listened. At the end, some students approached him, asking how he felt being close to the dictator. He replied that he saw himself as part of a machine, with no room to decide or think about anything other than his duties. Interviewing reporters tried to get him to offer opinions about the regime, but he avoided doing so. He said he was not a historian or a judge, that his intent was not to justify or accuse, only to recount what he had experienced. He did not use euphemisms or hypotheticals. He explained that he was part of a generation swept up by events, and that his only role now was to recount what he remembered. In his final years, he faced age-related health issues. He received care at public hospitals and was not a public figure. He received no support from organizations, and mostly those aware of his existence were researchers or families of those who had lived through the war. He did not attend memorial services or public events, only keeping in touch with a few reporters who had interviewed him years earlier. Separately, in 1947, a German citizen named Erich Priebke entered Argentina under a false name. The passenger record listed him as Odope and declared him to be a mechanic. His final destination was San Carlos de Bariloche, a city where he quickly integrated into the community as a respected merchant. Unknown to most of the time, this man, with a simple lifestyle and German origins, had been part of the Nazi extermination machine. During World War II, he was a captain in the SS and a liaison officer for the Gestapo in Rome, directly subordinate to Commander Herbert Kleur. In May 1944, both were responsible for executing Adolf Hitler's order to kill 10 Italians for every German killed in a guerrilla attack. Priebke helped organize the transportation of 335 civilians to the Ardeatine caves, where they were executed in groups of 5 with shots to the head. The entrance was blown up with explosives to conceal the bodies. 75 of the victims were Jewish, many randomly selected from the Roman ghetto. For decades, Erich Priebke's past remained largely a rumor. In Bariloche, he was the president of the German-Argentine Cultural Association, a powerful organization within the community, and also managed the German primary school, Primo Caprero. His role made him an influential figure, often seen at public events and community activities. In 1989, Esteban Buck, a reporter for the Rio Negro newspaper, began investigating Tunis Mays, a Swiss painter with a past linked to the Nazi regime who also lived in Bariloche. During his investigation, several residents mentioned Priebke's connections to Nazism. Buck requested an interview, and Priebke agreed, as they had previously met during an article about European festivals. The meeting took place on the 12th of that month at the German primary school's library. The conversation began with discussions about the German community and Priebke's work within the Cultural Association. However, at the end of the interview, after the formal questioning had ended, Priebke volunteered information about his direct involvement in the massacre in Rome. He described the execution as a retaliatory act that was, in his view, legitimate under the principles of war. The reporter, who had a hidden tape recorder, captured these statements. 2 years later, in 1991, Buck published a book titled El Pintor de la Suiza Argentina, The Painter of Swiss Argentina, which focused on Mays. In a short passage, he mentioned Priebke and his role in the execution of Italian civilians during the Nazi occupation. The book did not receive widespread attention, although it circulated within local communities. Unintentionally, the author had provided a crucial clue about the presence of a war criminal in Argentina. Few noticed this until 3 years later when a production team from ABC News in the United States, led by Delilah Erbs, arrived in Bariloche with the initial purpose of finding Reinhard Kops, another former Nazi official. During their stay, Erbs found Buck's book and took note of the passage mentioning Priebke. She arranged an informal interview, during which Priebke admitted his identity and past actions in Rome. Shortly afterward, a crew from the Primetime Live program, led by reporter Sam Donaldson, confronted Priebke with cameras as he left the Primo Caprero school. On camera, the former officer admitted to being in the Italian capital in 1944 as a member of the Gestapo and participating in the execution of 335 hostages. These images were broadcast on May 6, 1994, on ABC. The international reaction was immediate. The Italian Ministry of Justice requested his extradition based on the evidence gathered from the television program. Priebke was arrested in Argentina and placed under house arrest in Bariloche while legal proceedings took place. Throughout this process, the local community reacted in divided ways. Although many supported the decision to try him, a significant portion expressed support for Priebke, citing his decades of residence in the city, his work in education, and his perceived honesty. Some local media outlets even launched public campaigns in his favor, emphasizing his role as a model citizen and downplaying the crimes he was accused of committing. In numerous interviews conducted during that period, Priebke reiterated his perspective. He maintained that he was simply following orders from his superiors and that the execution was a legitimate act of war. He denied personal responsibility, claiming it was merely an administrative matter. This argument, based on the concept of obedience to orders, had been rejected by the Nuremberg tribunals decades earlier. However, Priebke remained steadfast in this view. In his public statements, his tone was that of an administrative official who was simply carrying out the decisions of others. After months of diplomatic negotiations, the Supreme Court of Argentina approved his extradition. On November 20, 1995, Erich Priebke boarded a plane to Rome. Upon arrival, he was put on trial for crimes against humanity at the Fossar guillotine. The Italian court determined that his responsibility was not simply following orders, but that he had actively participated in the selection and organization of the mass execution. In 1998, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment. During the trial, additional testimony and documents confirmed that Priebke had a significant role in the atrocities, solidifying the case against him and leading to his conviction. Erich Priebke's past resurfaced during his trial, initiated after years of declarations. Esteban Buck was summoned as a witness, and an interview with Priebke was submitted as documentary evidence. The court acknowledged that the case might never have been tried without his 1989 confession. Following a life sentence in 1998, the Italian prison system granted Priebke house arrest due to his advanced age. He spent his final years in an apartment in the Bandena area of Rome. There, he was often seen walking the streets, visiting cafes, and maintaining contact with old acquaintances. His image became a symbol for nationalist and far-right groups in Italy. Supporters organized private memorial services, gatherings with former comrades, and commemorative ceremonies. The sight of Priebke, a convicted war criminal, walking freely in Rome sparked significant debate within Italian society. Throughout this period, he engaged with the media and writers, consistently maintaining his stance. He admitted his presence at the events, but claimed his actions were a result of the regime's hierarchical structure. He expressed no remorse or reconsideration of his historical role. On several occasions, Priebke condemned his trial, asserting he was the victim of a political campaign. He rejected accusations against Jewish people and denied the atrocities at the Fossar guillotine were crimes. These statements, rather than eliciting sympathy, reinforced strong condemnation from a significant segment of Italian and international society. In July 2013, months before his 100th birthday, he was photographed walking in Rome. While appearing aged, he remained mentally alert. Shortly after, he recorded a video expressing his final wishes. In this visual will, Priebke requested burial alongside his wife in Bariloche, where he had lived for over 40 years. He used this message to justify his past, stating loyalty to one's past is related to one's beliefs. His final words were not a gesture of forgiveness or reconciliation, but a reaffirmation of his ideology. On October 11, 2013, Erich Priebke died of natural causes at his home in Rome. His lawyer, Paolo Giacchini, stated he remained lucid until his last days. International media outlets reported the news, revisiting the case. The Argentine government, through a statement issued by the Foreign Ministry, firmly rejected the possibility of repatriating the former Nazi officer's body. According to the announcement, Argentinians would not accept such offenses against human dignity. This official rejection was based on the fact that Priebke had entered Argentina under a false identity and was later judged for crimes against humanity. The delegation of Argentine Jewish associations, DWWII, also expressed opposition to his burial in Argentina. Its president, Julio Schlosser, publicly stated, "We do not believe that a war criminal can be buried in this country." Authorities at the cemetery where his wife was buried in southern Argentina also voiced their disapproval. The issue sparked renewed outrage and statements. Meanwhile, the former Nazi officer's immediate family avoided commenting. His son, Jorge Priebke, residing in Bariloche, made no public statements despite attempts by local media to contact him. His son's wife and children only expressed the family's grief over his passing. The city of Bariloche, for its part, had to confront its historical connection to the presence of former Nazi officers. Documentary filmmaker Carlos Echevarria, director of Pacto de Silencio, recalled that Priebke actively participated in the local German community, maintaining close relationships within that close circle. Priebke worked as a maitre d'hotel at hotels and later opened a food store. He attended organizational events and was known in the city as part of the German community. His connection to the massacre in Rome was a poorly kept secret for decades, but no one made an official denunciation until Esteban Buck's book was published and his involvement investigated. He lived a quiet life, seemingly beyond reproach, in a community that harbored others with similar pasts. The revelation surrounding Priebke's life in Argentina and the controversy following his death highlighted the complex issues of justice, memory, and reconciliation in the aftermath of World War II. His case served as a stark reminder of the enduring legacy of the Nazi regime and the importance of confronting historical atrocities. The debate surrounding his trial, imprisonment, and final wishes underscored the deep divisions within society regarding the appropriate response to war criminals and the need for accountability. His story remains a subject of study and reflection, raising difficult questions about the nature of justice and the responsibility of individuals and communities in addressing the crimes of the past. The refusal to allow his burial in Argentina sent a strong message that the country would not provide a haven for those who had committed atrocities against humanity. The case drew international media attention, exposing the network that sheltered Nazi fugitives in Patagonia. Sergio Weir, representing the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Argentina, stated that Prieb's death should serve as a reminder that the pursuit of war criminals cannot be limited by age. Weir stressed that Argentina was a haven for many Nazi regime members, and various governments were responsible for protecting them. He argued that Prieb's story is a warning against forgetting the past. Esteban Buck's testimony was also included in academic and judicial records. His 1989 interview became a crucial document that initiated the events leading to Prieb's conviction. Years later, Buck reflected on the case in new publications, suggesting that Prieb's confession was spontaneous and lacked remorse, as if he didn't realize the gravity of his revelations. The reporter never imagined that their conversation would have global repercussions. The Prieb case became one of the last to prosecute surviving Nazi criminals and symbolized the prolonged silence that protected many responsible for the genocide. Unlike other high-ranking officials, Prieb was not discovered through secret files or professional investigators, but through an unprompted confession during a casual interview. His last words were not an apology or moral reflection, but a reaffirmation of his actions. He died believing he had committed no crime, defending his participation in Nazi repression and how he chose to recount it, thinking no one was listening. An interview in a school library, a local reporter's book, and a television camera brought him back to where he had fled half a century earlier, ending the life of one of the last surviving SS officers, Christian de la Maisonneuve, who never apologized. Born into a French aristocratic family that had lost some prestige after World War I, Christian de la Maisonneuve was raised with strict discipline, isolated from common influences. His environment was conservative, nationalistic, and attached to traditional order ideals. The outbreak of World War II found him a teenager, but the conflict shaped his thoughts. As the German occupation of France became more secure, he grew increasingly disillusioned with the country's direction. Broad patriotic speeches and internal divisions alienated him from identifying with the Vichy government or the resistance. For him, communism was a greater threat than the German regime. During the early years of the occupation, he worked as a journalist in collaborationist media. His involvement was neither accidental nor forced. He strongly believed in the need for a unified Europe against Bolshevism. This thought led him to his final decision. In 1944, at just 20 years old, he joined the French Volunteer Legion against Bolshevism, a unit of the Waffen-SS. He did so not out of pressure or economic necessity, but out of ideological conviction. Joining the Charlemagne Division was a thoughtful decision, supported by his environment and accepted without question. He described that moment as an action in line with his beliefs rather than a drift due to circumstances. After initial training in Germany, he was sent to the Eastern Front, where he witnessed the harsh reality of war. The journey eastward exposed him to severe conditions, both physically and mentally. Contrary to his initial expectations, life on the front was miserable, exhausting, and deeply demoralizing. The ideals that had motivated him to join began to crumble. Orders were strict, hunger was constant, and losses were mounting. Nevertheless, he persisted in his unit, completing assigned tasks without standing out or deserting. He participated in the defense of Pomerania during the final months of the Third Reich in an atmosphere of inevitable defeat as the Soviet army advanced relentlessly. After his capture, he was transferred to French prisoner of war camps. While imprisoned, he wasn't tortured or physically retaliated against, but he was under constant surveillance. This period of confinement allowed him to reflect on his past, though it didn't immediately change his views. For a long time, he avoided mentioning his membership in the Waffen-SS, concealing his past upon returning to France. He reintegrated into civilian life as if nothing had happened, keeping his SS past a secret, not speaking about the front, the retreat, or his imprisonment. He rebuilt his career in media, even working for reputable magazines. This silence lasted over a decade. It was only when French society began re-examining its memories of the occupation period that difficult questions arose, particularly in the 1960s, when the image of collaboration began to be reassessed. Some admitted their mistakes, while others continued to hide their pasts. Lodge remained discreet, but his involvement in Pierre Schering's documentary broke that silence. On camera, he confessed for the first time to being a member of the Charlemagne division. He spoke without obvious remorse or pride, simply recounting the events, why he joined, and what the experience meant to him. He was one of the few French SS veterans to admit it publicly. This revelation divided his surroundings. Some condemned him, while others defended him. He decided to write his full story, resulting in the book The Captive Dreamer. He detailed his journey through the war, his later civilian life, and the internal conflict that accompanied him for years. He didn't seek to justify his actions, but to expose the context in which he made his decisions, emphasizing that at the time, the fight against communism seemed a reasonable cause to many young Frenchmen. He also asserted that his education prepared him to seek hierarchical structures where discipline and order were paramount, which the Waffen-SS provided. In later interviews, he clarified further, no longer trying to hide his mistakes or see himself as a victim. He admitted to being a member of a criminal organization, but claimed his motivation wasn't anti-Semitism or hatred, but an idealistic struggle against Bolshevism. He acknowledged that this cause was exploited by a brutal regime, but insisted that not all SS members were executioners. In his final words, he asserted that his generation was caught in a dynamic war where propaganda and the urgency of the times distorted moral judgment. He didn't apologize, but didn't deny the consequences of his actions either, concluding his story ambiguously, avoiding neither the past nor expressing clear public regret. Before his death, he avoided historical revisionist circles, veteran meetings, and commemorations, living a modest life dedicated to reading and writing. His confessions were recorded in his book and documentaries, leaving a mark on how an idealistic young man ended up joining one of the most feared organizations of the 20th century. His testimony didn't seek redemption, but offered a candid look at how context can lead individuals to extreme decisions. His story remains one of the few French voices acknowledging their past without ambiguity or evasion. When Christian Diem returned to France after the war, he didn't face immediate trial. His name wasn't on wanted lists, and he wasn't denounced by acquaintances. He used this to conceal his past. He started a new life. For years, Christian de la Mire lived a quiet life, working in fashion journalism and contributing to cultural publications. He intentionally avoided conversations about the war, never mentioning his experiences in the Waffen-SS or his time on the Eastern Front. This silence was shared by many former collaborators who, upon returning to France, preferred to erase that period from their personal histories. Over time, this unspoken agreement began to erode. Starting in the 1960s, the collective memory in France started to shift. The heroic image of the resistance was questioned, and collaboration was no longer a taboo subject. It was in this environment that Marcel Ophuls directed Le Chagrin et la Pitié, a documentary exploring the complexities of the German occupation of France. Christian de la Mire appeared in the film as one of the interviewees. He agreed to speak on camera, revealing for the first time that he had served in the Charlemagne division of the Waffen-SS. His testimony was startling because of its frankness and lack of emotional justification. He simply recounted the events, neither concealing his past nor seeking sympathy. The reaction was immediate. Many French people were confronted with an uncomfortable truth, that some of their countrymen had voluntarily fought for Nazi Germany. De la Mire's participation in the documentary made him a controversial public figure. Some condemned him as a traitor, while others considered him brave for speaking out. Instead of retreating from the debate, he decided to write his memoirs, resulting in The Captive Dreamer. The book chronicled his life from childhood to old age, with the title referencing his mental state during the war, a man trapped by his own ideals and led astray by a distorted vision of reality. He did not ask for forgiveness, nor did he condemn others, focusing instead on his personal journey without assigning blame or judgment. In his later years, de la Mire granted a few written interviews but avoided further television appearances. In these encounters, he remained calm and consistent with his previous accounts. He reiterated that his embrace of Nazism was not complete or theoretical. He did not share the regime's anti-Semitism, nor did he subscribe to its racial theories. He was drawn to the idea of a new, strong, and disciplined Europe, capable of confronting the chaos that he believed threatened the continent. This idealized Europe never materialized, but in the 1940s, its promise captivated many young people. His book sought to explain how that illusion had ensnared many of his generation, without excusing their actions, but highlighting the conditions that contributed to their involvement. In his memoirs, WWII also discussed the isolation that followed his public confession. Many acquaintances stopped speaking to him, and some professional doors closed. His name became associated with collaboration, and despite not being legally prosecuted, he faced social condemnation. This reaction did not surprise him. He acknowledged that he had accepted the risks of making his story public and did not expect understanding or recognition. He simply wanted his story to be recorded. He argued that history also needed to include the accounts of those who, even in error, acted on their own decisions. He believed that censoring these voices would result in an incomplete collective narrative. This was his primary motivation for publishing the book. He also clarified that he never sought to minimize the responsibility of the regime he had served and rejected any attempts at denial. He did not participate in events organized by apologists for the Nazi regime and distanced himself from historical revisionist movements. WWII's life continued in privacy, without overt political affiliations. He died anonymously, without memorials or public controversies. However, his testimony remains as one of the few candid accounts of a Frenchman who voluntarily joined the Waffen-SS. He sought neither redemption nor justification, but presented his life openly, leaving readers to draw their own conclusions. His decision to speak openly about his past stemmed from a desire to ensure that all perspectives, even those associated with a dark chapter in history, were included in the historical record. He felt that a complete understanding of the period required acknowledging the motivations, however misguided, of those who chose to support the Nazi cause. By sharing his personal experience, he hoped to contribute to a more nuanced and comprehensive understanding of the complexities of wartime France and the allure of extremist ideologies. This act of self-revelation, though met with criticism and social ostracism, was ultimately driven by a commitment to historical accuracy and a belief in the importance of confronting uncomfortable truths. He understood that his story would not be universally accepted, but he felt a responsibility to ensure that his voice and the experiences it represented were not silenced or forgotten. For Christian de la Maizière, writing his memoirs was a contribution he could make to help people understand a period marked by moral ambiguity and fanaticism. In the book's final passages, he reflected on time and memory, stating that while wars end, decisions made under pressure endure. He accepted that his youth led him down paths unacceptable by modern standards, yet he refused to deny events or hide in ignorance. His story is a straightforward account, devoid of embellishment or emotional justification. He believed that recounting his story truthfully, without manipulating events, was the only dignified way to confront his past. With this intention, he concluded his work, knowing his name would forever be linked to a contentious period in French history. He sought no sympathy, only to be heard. De la Maizière did not attempt to evade or distort his experiences to mitigate the consequences of his actions. Instead, he chose to document the paths that led him to become a soldier serving the Nazi regime. From the opening pages of his testimony, he explained that his decision to join the Waffen-SS was neither accidental nor born of ignorance. He knew what kind of organization he was joining. He made the choice as a mature individual, driven by a set of ideas that he then believed aligned with his vision for Europe and international politics. He had been educated in a conservative environment with strong references to order, discipline, and nationalism. This intellectual foundation made him susceptible to accepting authoritarian propaganda as a remedy for what he perceived as chaos and weakness. In his final reflections, de la Maizière did not attempt to erase or revise that period of his life. He acknowledged that he chose to serve in the SS out of conviction, not coercion or necessity. His service on the Eastern Front left a lasting mark, not because of direct violence, but because of the sense of shared purpose he observed among his comrades. He witnessed how some embraced Nazi doctrines without hesitation, while others, like himself, remained caught between military obedience and growing moral discomfort. He described the training rituals, the propaganda, the combat directives, and how they created an atmosphere where doubt was considered betrayal. In that environment, questioning was not tolerated. Everyone's role was to execute orders without ethical considerations. During his time in the Charlemagne Division, Christian de la Maizière was assigned to combat zones in Eastern Europe. While he claimed he did not participate in massacres or actions against civilians, he did not deny that such crimes occurred nearby. His duties included supervision, communication, and coordination with other units. This position allowed him to observe the internal workings of the Nazi military structure from a unique vantage point. He noted how genocidal logic was seamlessly integrated into operational commands without theoretical explanations. The machine operated without internal resistance. It was built so that no one questioned, and those who did were immediately isolated. With the fall of the Third Reich, Christian de la Maizière surrendered and was sent to prisoner of war camps. He went through several camps and was interrogated multiple times. Initially, he concealed his membership in the SS, claiming to be a regular soldier without ideological views. This concealment helped him avoid immediate punishment. For months, he lived among French prisoners, including former members of the resistance. He remained silent about his true identity until his release. After his release, he rebuilt his life. He did not leave France or attempt to assume a new identity. He simply chose to remain silent. For over 20 years, this strategy proved effective. No one spoke of French collaboration or participation in Nazi structures. Society prioritized maintaining collective amnesia. The situation changed with the appearance of the documentary Le Chagrin et la Pity. By agreeing to appear in this film, he broke his silence and voluntarily defended his actions. From that moment on, his life was marked by the weight of the revealed truth. Journalists relentlessly questioned his family. Neighbors viewed him with suspicion, and his workplace became hostile. Rather than retreat, he decided to express his story through a book. This was not an exercise in self-pity, nor an attempt to settle scores. It was an effort to put into words what is often omitted from official narratives: the motivations of people who, while not monsters or fanatics, participated in one of the worst oppressive regimes of the 20th century. In the final chapters, he addressed the moral judgment he faced. He didn't expect forgiveness or the restoration of his honor. He knew his name would forever be linked to national betrayal. He accepted that fact with a cold detachment. He suggested his story could serve as an example of the dangers of misguided idealism. He didn't condemn his critics. He only asked that his testimony be analyzed without reducing it to caricatures. He asserted that evil can manifest in an administrative, undramatic, and unemotional manner. According to him, this type of evil is more dangerous because it permeates everyday decisions, technical justifications, and anonymous orders. The banality of evil was not a theoretical concept for him. He had witnessed it up close and had become a part of it without realizing it at the time. Reflecting on his later years, Legia admitted he lived with the burden of his decisions. He made no attempt to separate himself from his past. His life was that of a man who had crossed a moral boundary, and although he could have turned back, he knew the mark would never be erased. He didn't ask for sympathy, but he also refused to be reduced to a label. He was aware that many others in similar circumstances had chosen silence until death. He chose to speak, stating, "I did so by personal decision, without external pressure, without any benefit in return." He considered this action, however small, his contribution to historical memory, not to justify himself, but to record that even at the edges of horror, there were people who, though mistaken, understood that their story needed to be told clearly. He passed away from cameras, without tributes or final scandals. His name was mentioned in a few articles, always linked to his past in the SS. There was no public funeral or statement from his family. His most famous last words were written in his book. In those lines, he said that the greatest punishment was not the rejection of others, but the certainty of having crossed a limit that should never have been crossed. This sentence summarized the essence of his testimony. No embellishments, no drama, no request for forgiveness, just a straightforward, precise, and coherent account. As if he finally understood that the true value of his story lay in concealing nothing. Christian de la Maizière was among the few who spoke out. One of the rare French Waffen-SS veterans who recorded his experience clearly, without ambiguity. His story remains unsettling because it shows that participation in evil doesn't always have a monstrous face. Sometimes it has the calm voice of someone who only wants to explain before silence covers everything forever. Before him, Rosism recreated step by step his role in the bunker. With the precision of someone operating a direct line without deviations, he detailed the calls, the movements, and the faces that marked the final hours of Nazi power. From a different scene, Eric Pripke recounted his role in the Ardeatine Caves massacre without emotional disruptions. placing himself at the center of an operational structure following closed instructions and offering little room for objection. None of them wrote to cleanse the past, nor due to pressure, nor seeking attention. They did so when their story could no longer be altered. Everyone contributed a piece of the puzzle with a different tone and from different contexts. But there was a common thread. They left a direct mark of their journey through the most active core of the Nazi regime. These accounts offer invaluable insights into the inner workings of a system capable of immense cruelty. They challenge the simplistic notion of perpetrators as inherently evil individuals, instead presenting them as complex human beings caught in the machinery of a destructive ideology. By acknowledging their participation and reflecting on their motivations, these men provided a rare glimpse into the psychological landscape of those who carried out the regime's darkest orders. Their willingness to break the silence, despite the personal cost, serves as a stark reminder of the importance of confronting uncomfortable truths and examining the individual choices that contribute to collective atrocities. The act of bearing witness, even decades later, becomes an act of defiance against historical revisionism and a testament to the enduring power of memory. Each narrative, in its own way, underscores the crucial need for vigilance and critical thinking to prevent the recurrence of such horrors. Furthermore, these accounts highlight the insidious nature of propaganda and the ease with which individuals can be swayed by extremist ideologies. By understanding the factors that led these men to embrace and participate in the Nazi regime, we can gain valuable insights into the mechanisms of radicalization and the importance of promoting tolerance, empathy, and critical engagement with information. The narratives serve as a cautionary tale, urging us to resist the allure of simplistic solutions and to remain vigilant against the dangers of dehumanization and the erosion of ethical boundaries. Their voices, though often unsettling, are essential for preserving the historical record and fostering a deeper understanding of the complexities of human behavior in the face of extreme circumstances.